Imagine you have the best corn in the world, but your neighbor has the only supply of iron. You want iron tools, and your neighbor wants your corn. That's the basic idea behind trade routes. They're simply the paths that goods and services travel to get from where they are produced to where people need them. These paths aren't random. They are carefully chosen roads, rivers, or sea lanes that allow for the movement of resources and are the backbone of every strong economy. Everything we use comes from a resource, from the wood in your desk to the oil that powers your bus. These are all resources. The problem is that Earth didn't distribute them evenly. Some countries are rich in timber, while others have lots of iron ore or oil. Since no one nation has everything, this uneven distribution is the reason trade exists. It's the ultimate global exchange, where countries use what they have plenty of to get what they lack. If a country has great farmland but no copper, it would be silly for them to try and mine copper they don't have. Instead, they specialize in growing food and trade that food with a country that has a lot of copper mines. Trade, therefore, becomes necessary to fill in the gaps. It allows a society to reach a higher standard of living by getting the best goods for the best price, no matter where in the world they come from. Before we had bulldozers and airplanes, geography ruled everything. If a giant mountain range or a scorching desert stood between two trading partners, they had to go around it. Think of the natural world as a maze. Rivers and flat coastal areas were the easiest paths, the natural corridors, while mountains and thick forests were the tough barriers. The earliest trade routes simply followed the path of least resistance set by the Earth's physical features. Long before the invention of trucks or trains, water was the easiest way to move heavy, bulky goods. If you had a large river running through your country, it was a fantastic inland highway. But the biggest trade game changer was the ocean. Shipping goods across the sea allowed civilizations to trade with people on other continents, leading to the creation of huge ports and harbors, which became the bustling entry and exit points for global commerce. One of history's most famous trade networks is the Silk Road. It wasn't one single road, but a series of routes that stretched for thousands of miles, linking China all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. Why did it take that winding path? Because the traders had to navigate around some of the world's toughest geography, like the massive mountains and dry deserts of Central Asia. The path they took was a compromise between distance and survivability. When we think of the Silk Road, we mainly think of silk, but so much more moved along this network. Traders mostly carried luxury goods like spices, gold, and fine porcelain, items that were small but worth a lot of money. More importantly, this trade route served as a colossal cultural exchange. Along with the goods, ideas, religions, inventions, and even, unfortunately, diseases traveled across the continents, shaping civilizations everywhere. Around the same time the Silk Road was active on land, the spice trade dominated the sea. Spices like cinnamon and pepper were highly valued in Europe, but only grew in places like India and Indonesia. This led European nations to invest heavily in building great ships to control the sea routes. Being able to sail directly to the source of the spices meant immense wealth and power, and it kicked off the age of global exploration and powerful naval empires. Today, we aren't limited by nature as much as we used to be. Technology allows us to simply flatten the land or build right over it. Think about how a cargo plane can fly over the North Pole, or how a railroad can cut straight through a major mountain range using tunnels. Modern technology gives us the power to choose the fastest or most efficient route, not just the easiest one, overcoming geographical hurdles that once stopped our ancestors. Sometimes we don't just go around a barrier, we cut right through it. That's the genius of canals. The two most important are the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal. These artificial shortcuts save ships weeks or months of travel time and immense amounts of fuel. By connecting oceans and seas that nature kept separate, canals drastically reshape global trade flows, proving that humans can create new, more efficient geographical corridors. Let's talk about oil. It is the lifeblood of our modern economy, but it's mostly found in a few key locations, especially the Middle East. Moving this huge resource requires massive infrastructure, huge pipelines that cross continents, and giant oil tankers sailing the seas. Because the world needs oil, the routes and regions that control its movement become incredibly important in global politics, showing how a single resource can drive international relations. If your country sits on a huge deposit of a valuable resource, like gold, copper, or oil, you instantly have a major advantage. These resources are an automatic source of wealth, and throughout history, control over them has often driven conflict. Resource-rich areas were primary targets for conquest and colonization, as powerful nations sought to control the supply of vital materials to fuel their own growth. Resource distribution directly influences which nations have power and influence. The world economy today is like a massive, interconnected machine. The shirt you're wearing might have cotton from India, stitched together in Vietnam, and sold by a company in the United States. This is called economic interdependence. We all rely on each other. When a trade route is blocked, say a canal is closed or there's political unrest along a border, it creates a ripple effect that can slow down manufacturing and raise prices everywhere. How do businesses decide which trade route to use? It's a balance of three factors. First, cost. Transporting bulky goods like iron by water is usually the cheapest. Second, speed. Moving medicine or electronics requires very fast air freight. Third, and often most critical, is security. A route through an area with war or piracy will be avoided, even if it's the fastest option, because safety must come first. Imagine a traffic jam on a major highway that everyone has to take. In global trade, this is a choke point. It's a narrow, often naturally formed passage like a strait or a canal, where a huge amount of the world's shipping traffic has to squeeze through. The Strait of Malacca, for example, is a tiny bottleneck through which most of Asia's oil passes. Because so much trade relies on them, these spots are constantly monitored and are considered critical to global security. Take a look at any major historical city, and you'll usually find it sitting at a key point on a trade route. New York, for instance, has a massive natural harbor and access to internal river systems. When two major rivers meet, or where an ocean trade route connects with the land, it becomes a perfect spot for trade to stop, exchange hands, and flourish. These geographic sweet spots are what led to the rise of many of the world's great urban centers. Because resources are distributed unequally, some regions are naturally wealthy, and others are naturally poor. For example, some countries have no natural access to the sea and struggle to participate in cheap ocean trade. This uneven distribution forces resource-poor countries to spend more money and energy to acquire the things they need, which often creates an economic divide and contributes to global inequality. Sometimes, not having a resource can be a good thing. If a country has very little oil, it's forced to be smart and come up with new ideas. For example, Iceland has almost no fossil fuels, but it has tons of geothermal energy from its volcanoes and hot springs. They used innovation to harness that natural energy, showing that resource scarcity can be a powerful engine for technological change and invention. The goods are important, but the cultural impact of trade routes is perhaps even more significant. As merchants travel, they don't just carry cargo, they carry their whole way of life. They bring their religion, their language, their food, and their art to new places. This mixing of cultures along trade routes is why many regions share similarities in their cuisine, or why certain religions spread far beyond their original homelands. In the 21st century, we're not just trading physical goods. The newest and fastest trade routes are invisible wires running under the ocean, fiber optic cables. These cables transmit data, information, financial transactions, streaming movies across the globe in milliseconds. While ships and trucks still carry physical products, the digital economy relies entirely on these new high-tech routes, showing that the definition of a trade route is constantly evolving.